Hi there, Kawasaki owners. Today on your 2018 Kawasaki Mule, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install eTrailer's 5,000-pound winch. And this is what our winch looks like when it's installed. To get it mounted up, we didn't use the bracket that came included with it, but instead we used a custom mounting bracket from Bulldog that is specifically designed for the Mule here. One of the things you will have to change out is the Fairlead here at the front, as this bracket is designed for Fairleads with a 5 7/8 width for the hole spacing, whereas the one that comes with the eTrailer winch is going to be 6 1/2. But otherwise it does mount right up to this bracket, and it greatly simplifies your installation. This winch is rated for 5,000 pounds, so that's going to be more than enough for any of your ATVs and UTVs out there. And 5,000 pounds, you could even use it, again, if you had it on a truck or a trailer, you could use it with a trailer. If it's a car hauler, this is something that I would put on mine at home for pulling a car onto my trailer. And it's also great for trucks, even though it's 5,000 pounds. You're not lifting it off the ground, you're pulling it across, usually on slicker surfaces like mud, so you should be able to pull out some of your smaller Jeeps and stuff like that with this as well. It has a synthetic rope, which is never going to rust or corrode. You don't have to worry about steel cables either, which can often fray and leave sharp edges, which could transfer over to your hand and leave you with some pretty gnarly cuts. So we don't have to worry about that with these. The Fairlead that comes included with it does have a nice, smooth, and rolled finish to it. This is ideal for your synthetic ropes, so that way it can easily roll right across there without causing any damage to the rope, causing any abrasions on it. For steel cable winches, you often see that they have rollers on them. You don't want to use a roller Fairlead with synthetic cable because it could potentially get down in between the rollers and start to rip up your synthetic cable. Those rollers are designed specifically for the steel cables. So if you are going to swap that out with something that maybe you already got, you don't want to do that with a synthetic one. Our hook here is held on by a 5/16 clevis pin, and it keeps it nice and strong. It's going to be able to withstand the 5,000-pound towing. And you also do get a small lead here, which is nice for pulling it out when you're ready to use it, because if it's cold out, this could be awfully cold. And then who knows, it could have a bunch of dirt and other debris on it. The rope seems to clean off a lot better, and it's easier on your hand to grab that. So I was cruising around in our four-wheeler here, and it died on me right here in the muck. I don't really feel like getting on the other side here and trying to push this thing back over to the shop so I can figure out what's going on with it. So let's grab our winch and let's use that to get it out of the mess, and then we can get it over there. We're going to start getting our four-wheeler out by coming over here to the side. We can loosen up the wheel here, and that'll put it in free spool mode. This allows us to easily grab the lead here and pull it out. It's going to be much faster doing this than using the out button that is for the powered section of your winch. So you can just grab it and head on over. So you want to find a secure place to hook it onto. A lot of times you could find a spot like on the frame or something. We're going to be hooking right here to the hitch though. Now if you are pulling this out and you got some company with you, I'd recommend to stay on the vehicle that you're pulling out. They could drive it in that direction and help steer it to help get it out if it's really stuck. We're working by ourselves though, and we got it stuck ourselves, so we're going to get out ourselves. We're going to drop it down into neutral so that way the wheels will roll. It'll be better on the transmission and the components in our four-wheeler while we're pulling it out. I do also want to recommend that if you are pulling this out by yourself, pay attention to your geography. You don't want to put this in neutral and have your vehicle with the winch on it downhill and then start to get it unstuck, and then all of a sudden it starts to roll. So make sure you place yourself in an appropriate situation where you're pulling it maybe uphill or where it's not going to roll at you. Included with our winch, we are going to receive a switched remote here. You can see it has our in and our out. And it has plenty of cable length. And I do like that it has all this cable length so we can get this out of here. This isn't really that useful for what we're doing at the moment here, but if your UTV or ATV happen to have gotten stuck, you could be on the side here kind of watching the path while pulling it out. So I do like that it gives you a little bit of flexibility to be able to kind of get around the sides and look at what you're doing while you're getting unstuck. We're all hooked up here, but before we operate it, we need to come back to the side and put it back into the lock position. And you'll also need to make sure that you have your vehicle that your winch is attached to in park, and I also recommend pulling the parking brake. We'll now pull our four-wheeler out. So now that we've got it pulled out of the mess enough to where we can hop in it and easily push this thing out of here, we're not in the muck anymore. I'm going to go ahead and put it back into gear there so that way it can't roll away from me and we can get our winch disconnected. And this winch does have a mechanical brake inside that holds when you're not operating the winch, as long as you have it locked in there. This is going to ensure that, once we pull it, if we're uphill and it's downhill, this is going to keep it from rolling back out on us. It's going to hold it in place at whatever position we've had it set at last. And now when you're ready to unhook it, you want to give it a little bit of slack so we can get it disconnected. Whenever using the motor to release the cable out, you do want to kind of pull on the cable as well, because it could bind up inside of there. So that's why I was just putting a little bit of pressure on it there, just so that way it is pulling out without loosening up and potentially causing a bind. The motor on this winch is a 1.5 horsepower permanent magnet motor, which operates fast and strong. The casing is water resistant to IP66 specifications, and it uses a single stage planetary gear train, which provides increased drum speed when compared to traditional worm drives. And you can see that here as it's pulling it in. It's faster than a lot of the older models. It draws up to 30 amps of power and has a gear ratio of 166:1. We'll begin our installation here at the front of our mule. And on our right here, we've got our winch with the mounting hardware and the mounting bracket and fairlead that it comes included with. On the left here, we've got a mounting bracket from Bulldog Winch. It's a custom designed bracket that's specific for the mule, so that way it mounts directly to the mule, and it's designed to mount up with Bulldog winches. Now our eTrailer winch luckily does have similar bolt patterns for mounting, so we are going to be able to use this to mount our winch onto. However, the fairlead that comes with the eTrailer winch doesn't match up to the bracket, so we are going to be using a Bulldog fairlead with this installation to complete it. You can get the fairlead just as a separate part, as a replacement part here at eTrailer, and I highly recommend it. It'll make your installation much easier, and it's an upgraded fairlead, as this one here is just a solid fairlead, where the Bulldog winch one has rollers on it, so it'll prolong the life of your cord. This is the bracket that comes included with the eTrailer winch. We're not going to be using it on this install today, but I do like that it comes with the bracket. If you have a trailer or something like that, that's primarily what this is used for, so you can mount it to the front of your trailer for pulling things onto it. So I do like that it comes with it. It does give you a mounting option. It's just not really feasible here at the front of our mule, just not a good mounting option. But you could easily move this winch over to your trailer if you wanted to, move it back and forth as you need necessary, so it's cool that you got this if you need it. So now we're going to start by getting our bracket mounted up. Again, this is a bracket from Bulldog that's custom for our mule here, and these are the mounting holes right here on our bracket. It's going to sit just like this. You'll see you have a couple of holes down each side. We want the middle set here, so we don't want the highest hole but the one right below it. That's going to line up with the holes in our bracket. And then the hardware you're going to get, we're going to use the two larger bolts. These are 3/8 diameter. They're the thickest ones that come in your kit. So we're just going to take off the nuts there. We'll then slide our bolts through. We're actually going to go the other direction. That way it'll ensure that these don't get in the way when we're trying to get our winch mounted up. Because if we look on the other side of this, there's no obstructions or anything there that we need to worry about our bolts coming into contact with. And then we'll install our nut onto the other side. We'll get it loosely installed onto each one of these to hold it in place. We can then go back and snug these down using a 15mm socket and wrench. We'll now put our winch into place. We're going to be putting ours in this orientation here with the electrical connections off towards the passenger side. When we look at the mounting plate instructions for the Bulldog winch, it does recommend to have it shows you have the lead here coming out the bottom. So we're going to have it the same way since we're using their fairlead and everything. We want it to operate properly in their fairlead. In the information that comes with this winch, it doesn't specify whether it should come out the bottom or the top, so we're going to be going with the Bulldog method to make sure that it works properly with these components. We're going to slide it through the opening here. It's a little tight, but it will just kind of rock right in there. And then we'll drop it down onto our plate and line up the holes in the bottom of the plate with the holes in our winch. We'll line up our bolt holes. So we'll take our hardware then, we're going to push it up through the bottom of our bracket and then thread it right into the bottom of the winch. The nut should be pre-installed in your winch. And we'll repeat that for the remaining 3 holes. We'll then go back and tighten these down using a 13mm socket or wrench. For the ones right above the front bumper there, you are likely going to need to use a wrench to get to those. We're now ready to install our Fairlead and the front bracket here where our Fairlead mounts. This is the one that comes included with the e-trailer winch, but if we look at the hole spacing, it's not going to line up with the hole spacing on our bracket here. So we are going to use a Fairlead from Bulldog that does have the correct spacing. And the one that comes with e-trailer has a spacing of 6.5 inches. The one that's going to match up from Bulldog is a 5 7/8 inch. That's going to match up properly with our holes. So you do want to make sure you're adding this to your cart if you're going to be mounting up an e-trailer winch using Bulldog's bracket. So we can go ahead and remove our zip tie. We'll slide our cable through. We also need to get our other bracket because this has to slide up to the bottom there, and they're all going to kind of line up just like this. We'll then take the hex head hardware that comes in our kit. These are the smaller diameter hex head bolts. We're going to slide the hardware through both brackets as well as through the Fairlead. And if you notice, the Fairlead does have recessed holes on one side. We want the recessed holes to be facing out, so that way our nuts can countersink down inside of them. Once we get this one started, then we'll just start the one over on the other side. We can then go back and tighten these down with a 13mm socket. We can then use our bracket as a template and use a 5/16 drill bit to drill out the holes in both the square slots here at the bottom. We can then take the carriage bolts that come in our kit. We're going to slide them from the front back so that way it locks into that square hole, and on the back side we'll place a nylon locking nut. We'll then do the same thing over in the hole on the other side. We'll then tighten it down using a 13mm socket. You can just push inward on the carriage bolt and that'll hold it from spinning thanks to the square hole. Next we'll need to mount our solenoid. To do this, we just use self-tapping screws run in the little ears located at the top and bottom of our solenoid there, at least in the orientation we've got it mounted in. To give you an idea where this is located, we're on the passenger side inside the front hood compartment. Just to the left of the box here where that pillar goes up, we mounted it right onto there. Now that we've got this box mounted and our winch mounted, we need to connect all of our wires. We'll start at the winch and we'll go from there, routing it up to our solenoid, and we'll go from here to the battery. Before you attach it to your winch, make sure you take the black cap that comes in your kit and just slide it over the end there. It's going to protect it. We're going to be putting these on each of the hot wires where they are exposed before connecting them on. After you slide it on there, you're going to follow that up with another flat washer and then a nut, and then snug it down with your 10mm socket. We'll do the same thing with the yellow wire on the other side, and then we'll continue routing the rest of our wires. Now we need to get these wires routed up to our solenoid. So we go through the opening right here by our winch. We wrap it around the pillar here at the top, and we're likely going to be putting a zip tie on there to keep these wires away from any moving parts like our suspension over here. And then these two wires are going to pop out right here on the inside. You can follow your other wires over until they come out in here. So now we're going to start connecting our wires here. The two closest to you are going to be your power and ground. You can tell those based on the wires going to them. And then the two in the back are your blue and your yellow. They are painted on top, so you can just match your wires directly to the little color on top. If you've mounted it up and you forget which ones are painted on top and you can't really get in to see them, use your cell phone. It works pretty well. You can put it in the old selfie mode and get an idea of what colors are what real quick, and then you can go ahead and make your connections. So I'm just removing the nut and the washer from the solenoid. I'm sliding on the appropriate colored wire and then putting that washer and the nut back on. And then we'll snug those up as well. They're also going to use a 10mm socket or a wrench. With both the blue and the yellow connected, we went ahead and attached the black and the red here. Due to the limited space, it's hard to see those connections, but again, we just used the color coding. Just pay attention that the red and the black do have these small wires going to it for your trigger for your switch. Make sure those wires do stay connected to the posts, because those are going to go red wire to red and black to black over here on the post. We then routed these towards the battery. To get there, we go down through the opening here, similar to where our blue and our yellow are, except if we chose to go by this kind of hose that's right here, because that hose, if we take a look down below, we can follow where that runs back towards our battery. So we just take it and we go down behind this plastic paneling, pushing it down until we reach the opening here. Then we go inside, and that's going to go underneath the floor. We then remove the seat so we can access the wires where they come out under the floor. Here's the underneath the floor section. We pushed it until we were able to grab the wire, and then we pulled it here and kept feeding it back. Now you're probably thinking, hey, this is a pretty long run. We did have to extend these wires in order to reach the battery. The wires included with the kit just can't quite make the run all the way to the battery since it's at the far end of this UTV. And our wiring comes out here at the battery. Now the red wire that comes in your kit does have a circuit breaker stack on those. We want this to be on the battery side of our connector here. So we got this over here, and you can see there's just a small lead where we're going to run this over to connect to the positive post here. Our ground will end up attaching right here to this ground stud. We wanted to route it back here so we've got basically a direct battery connection, because the battery cable here, the short run, is the same gauge as this. So that's essentially going to just extend our wire right over to here, because there's no real good attachment point on this style of battery clamp here, whereas this one actually has a bolt that goes into it for us to attach the positive side. Now the instructions do want you to make sure that this wire here where the circuit breaker stack is insulated. Now heat shrink, you're likely not going to have any heat shrink that's large enough to slide over this complete stack to insulate it. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to be zip tying it to this factory wiring right here to hold it up, because this is all plastic paneling, and that'll keep it away anything metal that it can ground out on. But as an additional step, we're going to insulate it just using electrical tape. So I'm just going to wrap this all the way around it to fully cover it up. It's not a bad idea to just check the tightness of each of the bolts before you do this. They should be pre-tightened when you get it from your kit, but you just never know what happens at the assembly plant. Double check, because then you got to rip all this tape back off. So here you can see our stack all taped up, and then we zip tied it to that wiring like we talked about. We then ran the positive wire down, removed that bolt with a 10mm socket, slid the wire on and reconnected it. And the ground wire, we removed the ground bolt there with a 10mm socket, slid it on, and then reconnected that as well. Again, making sure that all of our wires stay connected. We can now test it out. If we go back to the solenoid, you have this small harness here that's coming off of it. There's a connection right there for the included remote. So we're just going to slide those two together. We'll then screw them together so they can't come undone. And here we've got a remote. There is plenty of access there, so you can use your winch from a distance. We just want to see that it works. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the end, hit the out button, and it comes out okay. Press the in button and it goes okay. We can now attach the hook that comes in our kit, the pin that comes slid in it. Just pull out the cotter pin, and you can slide out the large pin. We'll then slide our hook through all the way, and actually I think I like it better with this end. That way we have the smooth side of our pin on the side where we make attachments. That way our cotter pin's not going to get hooked on things. And we'll just slide this in and then just push the cotter pin over to lock it in place and keep it from coming off of there on you. Just like that. Pin's not coming out of there. We've got our attachment right there. There's also a small strap that it comes with. There's also a small strap that comes included. This just slides over your hook. And this way you've got an easy attachment point to grab onto it. It's nice because your hook could be freezing cold if it's cold outside, or all kinds of dirty. This is just more pleasurable to grab than the hook there. And that completes our installation of eTrailer's 5,000-pound winch on our 2018 Kawasaki Mule.